to raise my left hand. If you can see my left hand, raise your left hand as well. Raise your right hand. I'm just making sure our sound is good. Clap if you can see my left hand. Clap if you can see my left hand. Clap louder if you can see my left hand. Clap more softly if you can see my left hand. Laugh if you can see my right hand. Laugh if you can see my right hand. Laugh louder if you can see my right hand. Thank you. A very warm welcome to all of you for this session, Women in Privacy One-on-One. As I have been introduced, my name is Luciana Thuo. I am an electoral specialist from Kenya, and it is a pleasure to be invited to this stage for the second time in a row. Thank you to Unwanted Witness. And this is a session where we explore the journeys of women who are shaping Africa's digital future. And I'm delighted this afternoon to have this conversation with Nadia Ishaq, who is a global privacy leader and who has expertise on data governance in Africa. This session is not just about data and about compliance frameworks. This session is really about women shaping the ethical core of Africa's digital transformation. We are going to explore what it looks like to work at the intersection of law, technology, and trust. So allow me to introduce our panelists for this afternoon, Ms. Nadia Ishaq. Nadia is a New York-based data governance attorney and a member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. She is a member of the board and advises global organizations on privacy, risk management, and compliance, and she also hosts the Global Privacy Podcast. Beyond her corporate expertise, she is a mentor, a thought leader, and an advocate for ethical leadership in privacy. Fun fact about Nadia you might not know is that she spent most of her childhood in Sri Lanka, and she loves to do triathlons, which means she enjoys swimming and running. What's the other activity in triathlon?
Biking.
Biking. And she feels like doing triathlons has actually helped her to thrive in her career. So please give a warm welcome to Ms. Nadia Ishaq. So we're going to start off this session by talking about your journey, Nadia, and how you came into privacy work. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite authors, Brené Brown, who says in her work, Daring Greatly, that courage often starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. So my first question to you is, when did you first realize that privacy was the space you wanted to show up fully, and how did that shape what you're doing in global leadership in the privacy space?
Thank you so much, Luciana. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be in Nigeria. To answer your question, I always tell people that the 13-year-old child in me who didn't want her parents finding out, her business, never grew up, right? I'm a very private person.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of I was 13 a long time ago. There's a lot of movement in information and the sharing of personal information since then.
Yeah.
But more recently, during COVID,
Yeah.
One of my friends, a very close friend of mine, had a very small wedding during lockdown, and the bulk, she could only invite 20 people to her wedding ceremony, and the rest of us were watching it on Zoom.
Yeah.
And her ceremony was Zoom bombed. And yes, and I think that was pivotal. I was thinking about this, after we spoke.
Yeah.
It was pivotal because I realized just how exposed we are when we are on our computers.
Yeah.
And it was something that I was, that was a pivotal moment where I was like, okay, I want to spend my time,
protect,
ensuring. And I mean, we know now, hindsight is always 20/20, but we know now that you don't have Zoom meetings and you always have a password that's private, right? You don't publish a link, but at that time we didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the moment.
Okay. And of course, we're now living in a very interconnected space globally, and compliance challenges are experienced across the world, and we heard from the panels earlier that there are different challenges across the globe on how we ensure compliance with privacy protections. But I want you to speak to how we balance, and I know you've written on this, whether we should be lifting and copy pasting whatever frameworks are operational in one context in another. How do we balance global frameworks with local realities in Africa?
I'm going to give you a very lawyerly answer, and you're not going to like it, but I'll also tell you what I think. The lawyerly answer is there is no formula, right? I mean, I think every data protection expert in this room will tell you that it is very, it really depends on context.
Okay.
It depends on, and I think the first questions that I typically ask when I'm looking at, clients, when I'm looking at advising somebody on their privacy programs, the first thing I think of is, what is the data, right? Where is it going? What are we doing with it? What type of data is it? Is it sensitive personal information? What's the risk profile of my processing this data? And I think that I start with that lens. I've written about it because, we've seen and since I wrote the article, which was a couple of years ago, there's been a proliferation of privacy laws around the world.
Yeah.
And compliance is a very tricky thing, right? Compliance suggests this kind of, they were talking about it in the panel earlier.
Yeah.
You think of checklists, and you think of, you're fearing a regulator, or you're fearing something. It's not necessarily about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's challenging for regulators too, because you're trying to standardize something that is very personal, right? So oftentimes I sit, I think, okay, what is my comfort level, right? And then, if it's an organization, you also have to look at trying to figure out what the risk profile, the privacy risk profile is in an organization, right? For example, if the data that you're collecting, which I know this was not covered in the earlier sessions today, but if you're collecting innocuous data, right, the risk thresholds are less. Right?
Yeah.
And so your other risks may be greater, your business risks, your operation, the costs may be more if in your operational costs. So for example, if you're a company that's handling, 3 or 4 data points, it may not be worth it for you to build out a global, your own internal global privacy program. So I think context is really important. I think that's the first point.
Okay.
But the second, more personal thing is, I always like to think, if it was my data, what would I like, and how close to what I would like could I get?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it sort of relates to what the panel said earlier about not working towards compliance, but having them in mind what the customer needs, and then creating a framework around that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move quickly to the next segment, which is about power and leadership and gender, because of course, as a woman in this space, you have experienced this space in a very personalized way that other people may not. And what is common in the human experience, whether you're male or female, is failure, right? Having experiences where things don't go the way you want. And again, to cite my favorite shame professor, Brene Brown, in her book, Rising Strong, she says, falling down is how we grow, staying down is how we die. You've held leadership roles at IAPP and also at the South Asian Bar Association, and now you're working at a global level. What challenges have tested you personally, and how have you risen from those and become strong as a privacy practitioner?
I mean, we talked about this a little bit, Luciana. I really genuinely think it's my own mind. What I think are my own limitations. I think women always question. I mean, I joke about this with my husband. He'll go into a room, if he wants something, he'll just ask for it. I will be like, oh, is this can I get away without it? Do I need it? But and you can argue about gender dynamics and whether men can actually analyze things, but I'm joking. They can. But it's just I think self-doubt is something that we all experience. And when we were talking about this, so I think overcoming self-doubt would be the first thing. But then one of the things that became apparent when we spoke, right, is, you talked about leadership, and I actually turned around and told you I don't see myself as a leader. Is sometimes when you're trying to climb, you're so focused on getting to the top,
Yeah.
you don't really see how far you've come. And I think everyone in this room the fact that they're here has climbed to a certain level, right? The fact that we're on this stage means that we've climbed to, but I think that recognition is really important because it also, it makes you understand your value, right?
Yeah.
And so just seeing that, I think, is important, you know, from a gender-specific perspective.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I have found interesting, just that you speak about how women experience the world versus how men experience the world, and I didn't know this before I read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. How we approach opportunities as women is very different from the way men approach them. So women try as much as possible to overqualify, to feel like they're entitled to certain positions, whereas men just apply, and if they get it, well and good, and if they don't, oh well, no skin off my back, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one of the things that as women we have to overcome to move to higher levels, because these opportunities, if you apply for an opportunity and you don't get it, it doesn't mean you're not good. It's just feedback that that was not a good opportunity for you. But we need to overcome the shame of not getting it or failing, which sometimes is what keeps us from reaching for higher levels. But I want to speak also about boldness, because if you're going to climb up the career ladder in a very fast evolving landscape like what we have today because of the advent of technology, then it can't be the way we grew up in the legal profession, where you are going to make partner track, for example, and go up the ladder, right? And again, Sheryl Sandberg in her book talks about how careers are now more like jungle gyms more than like ladders, right? So how do you encourage women to position themselves to take up spaces, not just in their jurisdictions, but globally? Because the world has also opened up, and so there are more opportunities available. So how do you encourage people to look at the world as their oyster, for lack of a better way to put it?
You know, there's a couple of things, right?
Yeah.
The world isn't the world that we grew up in,
Yeah.
you know? When I talked about the evolution of technology since I was 13 years old, we don't have to go back that far, you know? We can talk about five years back, you know, when the Zoom wedding happened, for example, right?
Yeah.
The world is changing. The way we did things in the past are changing.
Yeah.
There isn't one set of rules. And you know, this boldness that you talk about, it comes from asking questions,
Okay.
right? You know, my nephew has a book that says there's no such thing as a silly question. And I think, you know, I'm oftentimes in rooms with lots of people, and I'll think that something is a silly question.
Yeah.
And it may not be. And I think with privacy, with privacy, cybersecurity, with the advent of AI, it's all new, right? The laws are new.
Yeah.
And you know, we joke about this all the time, you know, when we're reviewing resumes. You can call yourself an expert, but that level of expertise is stuck in time and place because it's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Right? There are changes being made to regulations. There's changes being made to where data applies. And I just want to touch on something else, you know, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Privacy is global,
Yeah.
right? You can be seated, and I think that's one of the things that attracted me to it in the first place.
Yeah.
Is you can be seated in Kenya, you can be seated in Lagos, you can be seated, you know, anywhere in the world, in New York, in Brussels, but you may need to be aware, depending on the type of data that you're touching, about something that is happening thousands of miles away from you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And one day there may not be like law, and another day they might be.
Yeah.
So expertise, you know, when I talk to people, young lawyers, and you know, young women specifically, there's always space to learn something, you know, and it's something new, and it could be something that there may not be that many people in the world that would have expertise on it, you know, because everyone is still learning. So you can pick one aspect of privacy. You don't have to know everything. And you could take that and choose to study it. There's ample resources out there as well, many of which are free, which, I'm happy to talk about too.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that the most important skill to have now is just a growth mindset.
A growth mindset, a growth mindset, a willingness to ask difficult or not so difficult questions.
Okay.
Because something seemingly simple could actually be complicated.
Yeah.
People who advise, who are privacy lawyers, you can ask them, you can get a question in, from marketing saying, can I put this up on the website? It seems very, very simple, but you're just like, wait a minute, what is it actually,
Yeah.
So it's also just, you can ask simple questions, but viewing it through the lens of, what is the data? Is it personal? Or is it sensitive? Like, that could be really helpful for someone who's starting out.
Okay. And I guess it's also important that you're not afraid of looking silly. Just as you said, there's no such thing as a silly question. So I'd like us to move quickly to our second last segment, which is on how to build a career in data privacy. I know you've already spoken a bit about this, but I still want to speak to the person who is trying to figure out whether there's room for them to make a unique contribution to this space. And I want you to speak to young African women to ask, and the question I want to ask is, how can they leverage relationships, mentorship, and their unique strengths to step confidently into leadership in this data governance space?
So I think mentorship is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And, there may not necessarily be one mentor. A friend likes to talk about this a lot. It's like, who are your board of directors, your personal board of directors?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard, but it's actually a valuable tool. You may have certain people that you reach out to for particular purposes.
Okay.
Right. And with the world of privacy, if you're based in Nigeria, your mentors don't have to be Nigerian, right? The world, data governance, this world, this age that we're living is a lot more flat than, than it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can find people that are working in particular areas. There is always space to read and write about things, to research.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say though is that there are certain things. Yes, there's no such thing as a stupid. There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
But there is something as a wrong answer, right?
Uh-huh.
If you are going to position yourself as an authority on something, you need to make sure you get it right.
Okay.
Right? And like the way that I like to do that though is I generally look to people who know more than me.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's kind of why I started the privacy podcast.
Yeah.
And there are, it's because everything's moving so fast in the world, there's a wealth of information out there, and there are a wealth of, there are people that are willing to share information.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out there too.
Okay. As we move on towards the end, there's something that I find useful when I speak to women, especially women who have journeyed ahead, is to ask, where are the pitfalls? What do you see as something that I should be concerned about on this journey, which could hold me back if I'm not aware of it? And I say this because I read How Women Rise, a fantastic book by Sally Helgesen, and I like that she got perspectives from a man. She co-wrote it with Marshall Goldsmith. And she said there's certain habits that hold women back. They've studied both men and women, and they found in particular there's 12 things that women do that men don't do that hold them back. And some of the things are things like downplaying their achievements, overvaluing expertise, the perfection trap. I have to get all my ducks in a row before I can ask for a promotion, right? So if you were to speak to someone in the room who wants to walk the journey that you're walking, what would you tell them are the pitfalls you have seen that they could avoid as they try to rise to a global stage?
I mean, the first thing is you can always jump back up. Your ability to bounce back up is up to you, right?
Okay.
There's no such thing as, that's the other thing, is with the world today, people's memories can be short.
Yeah.
I'm saying can be because aren't always,
Yeah.
right? But there is space to bounce back up. That's the first thing. Two, if someone is, critiquing or giving you advice, or, it may not be personal. It's, it could just be what it is. Take it for what it is.
Yeah.
I think gender plays a role in that sometimes. Is that
Yeah.
we tend to take criticism more personally.
Yeah.
And we tend to think that our jobs define who we are and what we do. And I think that those would be the two things, I think. You can always bounce back up.
Yeah.
And it's not personal. There are many factors that play into, anything,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And, from a privacy perspective, too, understanding context is important.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes that actually plays very directly into your work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading Tara Moore's Playing Big yesterday, and she was talking about how women are more susceptible to criticism because we are socially conditioned to seek acceptance, and that's why women struggle with criticism more than men. And she proposed something which I found interesting, is to look at any form of criticism or rejection as just data. It's just information. It just tells you that person is not your audience. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily wrong on the path that you're on. It just tells you you need to pivot to a different audience. So I want to close with the segment on the future. Where do we go from here? Before we bring in the audience into the conversation. And I wanted you to just speak to where you see opportunities lying. Where could people look to for opportunities to step into this space? I know you already said pick something and just specialize in that area. You don't have to do everything in data privacy. But where do you see as the opportunities for Africa in redefining this space? Because earlier I think there was a conversation as to whether Africa just creates frameworks based on what has been done elsewhere, yet Africa could also look inward and say, what do we have to offer to the global space? So what opportunities do you think exist for us to redefine the privacy space, if at all?
So Africa is really interesting, and I'm wary of referring to Africa, an entire continent,
Yeah.
As a homogeneous entity.
Yeah.
But I find the digital evolution in Africa fascinating, right? Coming here, or just, I've only been here for several hours, I've had to share a wealth of information, to check in at the hotel, to get my tickets, I've given I've given the organizers a little bit of grief because I made it difficult for them because I was reluctant to share my passport page,
Yeah.
In this big group. And
Yeah.
part of that is, and I bring this up because you're in this really interesting intersection of new and old,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you have some of these old processes in place, and you are moving forward, and what makes it unique and scary, and if you're a privacy lawyer, will give you an ulcer all at the same time, and very exciting,
Yeah.
is this evolution, right? I used the example, I was talking to someone at lunch, of, I gave the hotel my passport page because I needed to. I was tired, I wanted to get in.
Yeah.
But say that system went from being, and I don't know, maybe it is, I did not inquire, being a privacy expert myself.
Yeah.
As we, say that picture becomes digitalized, right? Like
Yeah.
say they decide to go back and take all their manual records and store it somewhere, right? And then they decide to use that information, for other purposes.
Yeah.
That's tricky. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's also very likely something that can happen.
Yeah.
That's just a small example, right? There's a lot of potential, I think, for people to try and understand processes in sophisticated and not so sophisticated organizations, because it's moving fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of movement just in the privacy space. I think, they talked about data minimization
Yes.
in the panel
earlier
before,
Yeah.
but also, consent practices.
Yeah.
I consented for my passport picture for this very particular purpose, Well, let's talk about data retention. If I had asked the person behind the counter if they could shred it once I check out, are they going to shred it? Like, that's not going to happen. So there's space there. And then, organizations like this are really helpful for advocacy, right? Because I think, again, the person, I could have fought with the person behind the counter, but she was just doing her job, right? The understanding, or to gain sort of a macro culture of privacy. I mean, I don't know if it exists anywhere in the world, honestly. But just to understand, why am I doing this? What data, what data am I collecting? There's so much space that can, you can work for an organization, you can work in advocacy, you can train people, you can offer trainings to individuals who are being recruited for such purposes. There could be certifications for, people who take on roles where they collect data. And data is collected at every level of every organization. And then from the technology perspective, there's a wealth of opportunity. AI is, coming in. I think the one thing that, when you talk about AI is, if you wanted to, there's a lot of technical skills that can be achieved. There's a lot of access to courses. Microsoft has courses, IBM has courses, Google has courses, to help you understand how AI works. And in this world of agentic AI too, anyone can jump on and, create something, right? You don't have to have it, So there's a sort of democratization of knowledge too. And so it's just understanding, do I want to work in what space? And, what skills can I actually find to supplement those,
I hear you, okay. Because we're running out of time, I want to open up the conversation to the room and see whether there's anyone with questions or comments on the conversation that we've had. Anyone who wants to engage Nadia on what she has said, and if not, we can end on a quick fire round. But let me give an opportunity to those in the room. Okay, I see a hand here. If the team could help me to get a mic.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Forgive me, it's not a women in privacy question, but it's honestly just about the fact that I noticed that you are an AIGP certified individual, and I would really love to understand from your perspective, especially sitting on the IAPP board, what is the actual value in doing that particular certification? Like you mentioned, I mean, agentic AI, so on and so forth. When you look at some certifications like AI plus certs, ISAC has come up with a new one as well. Things are moving so quickly. So what do we have within AIGP that stays constant enough for it to make sense?
So I don't know if I'm fully qualified to answer that question, but I can tell you the value I gained out of it, I think. Because I mean, I don't know every accreditation out there, and I have not done an assessment on which one. Firstly, it also depends on your background, right? I'm a lawyer by training, and I think privacy lawyers or data attorneys, private data protection attorneys, struggle with technology, right? And they struggle with talking to people who are immersed in technical spaces. And it's an operational, there's a lot of operation, it's an operational practice as well, right? So I think for me, the value that I got out of the AIGP is to understand, one, it gives you a basic understanding of, the different types of AI tools, which was new to me. I also did this a while back. There's a lot of, there's a lot more it's a fast moving space. And this goes back to, again, also what I said about knowledge being a time and space thing, right? There's been a lot more since I did the certification myself. But it gave me an understanding of how LLMs, how AI works, the different types of AI tools. What you look at from a governance perspective, I think, is really helpful. How you view, use cases, how that plays out. When you're a privacy lawyer, you tend to look at things through a very, like a streamlined lens. And AI is a little different with, because it touches on many things, right? What a use case, what a use case for an AI tool is perhaps, I think, the most important question that you need to ask yourselves when you're trying to come up with AI, governance, when you're looking at governance. There are many other questions too, but I think that was kind of the value that, I don't know if I answered your question because but that's what I got out of it, yeah.
Fair enough, thank you.
So Nadia, allow me to thank you for your insights and for your leadership. Thank you for reminding us that building a career requires courage, it requires consistency, it requires commitment, and we wish you all the best in all the work that you do. Please join me in thanking Nadia for being on our panel this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand over the session now back to Unwanted Witness. Thank you, everybody.